Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to our friends in the U.S. Good afternoon to our guests from the U.A.E. and the Middle East region. Ramadan Kareem to all of those of you who are observing this holy month of Ramadan. Thank you for joining today's discussion with Hana AlHashimi, head of the office of the U.A.E. Special Envoy for Climate Change. We are pleased to have over 200 registered guests for today's webinar, comprising business executives, government officials, and energy industry thought leaders, and the media. These include friends and partners from the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi, the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, our friends and close colleagues at the U.A.E. Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the U.A.E. Consulate in New York, the Environmental Agency Abu Dhabi, the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, Expo 2020 Dubai, our partners, the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington, the Atlantic Council, and we're very pleased to be represented by 3 states in the United States, Minnesota, New York, and Alabama. As I said, we also have press in attendance from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News, Reuters, the Financial Times, Platts, and Khaleej Times. I should note that this session is on the record. It is being live streamed, and a video recording of the event will be posted on YouTube, where more people will have the chance to watch it in the coming days. I should also note that the audience is welcome to submit questions through the Q&A feature on Zoom at the bottom of your screen. The U.A.E. has long been a leader in recognizing climate change, working to mitigate the worst effects of global warming, and ensuring a cleaner, safer, and healthier future for our planet. As a reflection of these efforts, in November 2020, the U.A.E. appointed a special envoy for climate change, His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber. His Excellency subsequently turned to Hana AlHashimi to head his office. Today's conversation with Ms. AlHashimi falls under the auspices of the US-UAE Business Council's recently launched Climate Change Task Force, which is focused on supporting efforts by the U.S. and the U.A.E. governments to address the negative effects of climate change. Today's event truly could not be more timely. From April 2nd to April 4th, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change John Kerry visited the U.A.E., where he met with senior leadership, including His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, and Deputy Supreme Commander of the U.A.E. Armed Forces, and His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber. Last week, His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber met with U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. And later this week, His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber will be one of the key representatives for the U.A.E. at President Joseph Biden's Leaders Summit on Climate, with 40 world leaders who will meet to underscore the urgency and economic benefits of stronger climate action. The U.A.E. has made a commitment to play a key leadership role in working with the U.S. going forward and the global community in mitigating these worst effects of climate change and preparing for a sustainable energy future. We are pleased to hear more about this today from Hana AlHashimi, who is helping spearhead these efforts. Prior to her appointment as the head of the Office of U.A.E. Special Envoy for Climate Change, Hana previously led the International Organizations section of the United Arab Emirates Prime Minister's Office, leading partnerships with the United Nations, OECD, and the African Union, among others. Hana served as a senior advisor to the President of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly from 2018 to 19, as team lead for climate action, sustainable energy, frontier technologies, and information and communications technologies, and as the liaison with the Group of 77 and China, a group of 134 countries from the developing South. From 2015 to 2018, Hana served as Happiness Representative, Sustainable Development, and Digital Cooperation Expert at the Permanent Mission of the U.A.E. to the United Nations in New York. Hana knows the U.S. very well. Her prior experience includes project development for sustainable energy accelerators at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization in Vienna, Austria. Hana holds a Master's of Science in International Relations and Diplomacy from Leiden University and the Netherlands Institute for International Relations, and a Bachelor of Commerce in General Management and the Social Context of Business from McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Hana, we could not be more pleased to host you today, and we very much appreciate and thank you for the close partnership that you've had with us over the years. Over to you for your opening remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Danny. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And thank you so very much for all the members who've joined from far and wide. It's great to have some friends on the call with us, and friends that are from previous roles, and friends that I look forward to working with in this current role, of course. So Danny, thank you for the very warm welcome. It's really, I think that the timing is absolutely ripe for this discussion, and it's such an honor to join you. The global narrative around climate change is evolving so much, and really has taken quite a shift over the last decade. It's no longer a matter of just doing the same things less badly, but rather working collaboratively through international cooperation in order to change the way that we do things as the international community. And, you know, the UAE is historically a pioneer in the region in developing renewable energy and other climate mitigation technologies. Our clean power capacity, including solar and nuclear, is on track to reach 14 gigawatts by 2030, which is a dramatic increase from just 5 years ago. We're also known to have established the region's first commercial scale carbon capture and storage network, Riyadh, a technology that's critical for carbon abatement and climate change mitigation. And we're also the first Gulf country to sign and ratify the Paris Accords back in 2015. And we've recently announced the first economy-wide target for our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC. Really, this is all to say that climate action is absolutely built into our policy as a country, and it's a fundamental part of how we see both our present and our future. But we're not alone in doing this nationally as a country. We've also allocated $400 million in aid and loans for clean energy projects, including $100 million in capital to bring renewable energy projects to 27 island nations in the Pacific and the Caribbean. And it's been really transformational just to hear the stories from these island nations and from our countries that are close friends of the UAE on how this has transformed their lives. In many countries, Danny, providing renewable energy is not just a matter, as we start of the right thing or the trendy thing. It really is a matter of empowering entire communities, providing vehicles for children to be able to study at night, for businesses to be able to grow and to be able to continue. And in the context of the pandemic, this has become absolutely essential. And so increasingly, we've been working with partner countries, not just on their development, but also on building back better, both from after natural occurring phenomenon and also after the pandemic. And we're very, very blessed to have started this journey 15 years ago with the creation of Mastar, and to continue it today, and to see so many countries, of course, joining on board with higher climate ambition. As a country, we are, of course, a young country. We're very honored to turn 50 this year, and our population is also young. But we're working collectively to advance the climate change agenda, and we believe that this goes hand in hand with securing a brighter future for ourselves, for our youth, and for our country. Our leadership is absolutely committed and is absolutely convinced that there is a business case for climate action, and that this can be a part of our development journey as a nation as we move towards being 100 years old in 2071. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for those opening remarks. I have to tell you that I was struck on one of my first visits to the UAE in this role that I have by the country's leadership in this area, by the country's visionary leadership in trying to play a role that helped the world. And I have to say that what I found was the UAE never preaches, but always tries to just show by example and lead by example. And that's such a wonderful quality that has shown through, particularly in this initiative. You know, Dr. Sultan and Mr. Kerry had a virtual meeting in late January, literally within days of President Biden taking office and former Secretary Kerry being appointed to this role. What's the significance of that? That the UAE was one of the first countries that Secretary Kerry contacted and started engaging with as part of this effort.
Thanks so much for the question, Danny. Really, I think that Special Envoy Kerry's visit, it's a further testament to exactly what you said, our joint leadership's priorities, but you know, the deep commitment that the UAE and the US share towards advancing the climate change agenda. You know, we've already mentioned that this is a global challenge and it requires global solutions. The UAE has long been a regional leader in advancing environmental sustainability, and thank you for recognizing that just now. And we do believe that by working with the United States, that we can continue to galvanize nations all over the world and to collaborate and drive forward this important agenda. So during the visit, His Excellency Dr. Al-Jaber and John Kerry discussed innovative ways in order to tackle the challenges further. And in advance of the UN Climate Conference in November in Glasgow, the two special envoys agreed that they would set up bilateral working groups that advance our nation's shared global climate agenda and contribute to regional and global sustainable development. I can't overstate perhaps the significance of the visit and how privileged we are to be able to work so closely with the United States. And we do think that a lot of this has to do with the investments that are and the priority that our leadership has given to developing a robust renewable energy sector, both at home and abroad. You know, renewables really was one of the first manifestations of our efforts towards future readiness as a country. And I'm sure, Danny, in your various conversations that you've heard this term, future preparedness, future readiness, we really are a nation that's almost obsessed with this notion of being ready for the future. And this comes from, in large part, from our history and realizing the importance of relying on more than one sector and on continuously innovating and anticipating on the future in order to create it and play a meaningful and progressive role in it, so that we can secure, of course, the well-being for both present and future generations. And in the climate space, you know, this can be seen very much by how the leadership took the long-term view back in 2005 that renewables would become commercially competitive. And that we were better off by being first movers than by being reactionary. And this was an intensive process, Danny. It wasn't something incidental. Investments really had to be made in local capacity to build and run plants, in policies that would attract investment, and in the technology itself, so that it could be proven and it could be economically viable in the region. And although there was a lot of criticism at first on the role of a hydrocarbon producer in this space, on whether it's greenwashing, you know, some thought that we were even traitors to the entire oil and gas industry. When we look at today, there's no doubt of what we're doing as a nation. We're very privileged to have the cheapest solar in the world, to know that our daytime cost is less than any fuel source by a wide margin, and that's even gas. Solar is our way to reduce power costs for consumers and industries, especially heavy industries, so that they can be more economically advantaged. We're very excited that with the news that Emirates Global Aluminium is now supplying green aluminium to BMW as the first of its kind, and that this really underscores that green will be a selling point for other exports as well from the country. And with the thousands of megawatts of solar under development, and we're very privileged that Secretary Kerry could visit a couple of these sites and could see the plans to have the third, largest in the world or in its league, at least, solar plants under development. And we do see that the significance of this is that it will push the advancements more and make even more of a business case for that, so that we make more of a case for green investments making sound business sense. We're also really privileged, of course, as you know, Danny, to host the International Renewable Energy Agency and to have 184 member countries. And we were very privileged that Secretary Kerry could also hold his bilaterals with the agency and discuss further areas of cooperation. Secretary Kerry also visited, of course, Masdar, and perhaps we can unpack the different parts of his visits later on in the conversation. But fundamentally, I really think that the investments that have been made in the sector really were recognized by Secretary Kerry, and that his visit was testament to the value that both the UAE and the US place and believe that we can create together in driving climate change as an agenda forward together.
Well, Hana, that's just quite a statement. We all know the UAE is the third largest exporter of oil, if you will, and for you to then say that the UAE is building, in the process of building, the third largest solar plant in the world, I mean, that's just quite a transition going on in your country right now, and quite a leadership role that you're playing. I'm curious. Secretary Kerry's no stranger to the UAE. Secretary Kerry has visited the UAE when he was senator, when he was secretary. What you took close part in his visit? What struck him as different or new or innovative during his visit? What did he walk around and look? You said he was at the solar park. You said he was at Masdar. I think he was also at Abu Dhabi's Noor at the Shams Solar Park, and he was also at Mohammed bin Zayed Artificial Intelligence University. What were his reactions to what's going on in the UAE today, just maybe 4 years later since the last time he was there?
Well, Danny, I certainly can't speak for the secretary, but I at least had the impression that I got certainly was, although Secretary Kerry knows the UAE very well, and he knows certainly our prioritization of climate action and our role, particularly in encouraging a progressive dialogue globally as well as regionally. I think that he was particularly, and he did state that he was particularly pleased with the visit because it meant that he could see, I think, the extent of the different investments that were being made and the different work that was being made. Yes, we are an oil and gas producer, and our emergence as a regional leader on climate action, as well as our commitment to being a regional convener and to working together in this region, really comes from a deep-seated belief that this is an essential part of our development growth model. I think that the Secretary was particularly, I did want to clarify actually on the solar plants, all three of them, so Noor, Shams, and upcoming Al-Dhafra, at their time were the largest, I think, in the world in terms of single source solar. However, the beauty of it is that the developments are spreading so quickly all over the world that as soon as they've already hit the record, they've already broken the costs globally, and then they're pushed further through the competitive process, and that gives you a hint of just how quickly really the sector is emerging and progressing globally. I think that one of the things we hadn't discussed yet was about carbon capture and storage, and this is something that we've made a commitment to increase sixfold by 2030. Right now, we were the first country in the region to invest in carbon capture and storage, with 800,000 tons of installed capacity right now. And I think this is significant because we know, Danny, that oil will continue to be used for decades to come. It will continue to be a big part of the transition, as particularly for other countries as they transition away from higher carbon sources of fuel. But we're very much committed to making sure that the production of that oil and gas is also includes reduced emissions. And there's a lot of studies that indicate that carbon capture will be quite important in that transition as well, in order to as a mitigation tool. As well as the other investments, their role. I know that many of our audience members would be particularly working in their own fields on their own plans for how climate action may be a part of economic diversification, of job creation, of even development of new technologies. And I know that from the UAE perspective, that our financial commitment has really been substantial and has yielded results. I think that was also recognized during the visit. I think that a significant part of the visit as well was the dialogue with the rest of the region. And I think that these meetings are just as critical to the climate action cause as financial investments are, because without dialogue, we really can't harness the substantial power of other regional and global players to really make a difference. So that's really, I think, really at the top of our minds coming out of that visit. And I'm happy to speak more on the solar parks if that's helpful.
Sure. I'd like, if we could, I want to just a quick question on the visit to the AI university. That seems a little, odd. Not odd, and that's not the right word. It just seems a little unique to go visit a university of AI on this visit. So tell us how that links into what you're doing and what your plan is, because obviously it's very key and very important.
Thank you, Danny. Well, the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, of course, is newly launched, and it's the first of its kind university that's solely devoted to the study of AI and applications in emerging fields. And in the UAE, we certainly view artificial intelligence as an important tool for the future, and one that can help us address a magnitude of challenges, with climate change being certainly one of them. Some of the ways in which we're looking at tools is to see how we can track and identify optimal mitigation solutions, identify areas of concentrated solar energy that would inform solar panel installations sites, as well as predicting air quality for wind energy, as well as much more. So AI can actually optimize and maximize our use of renewables that makes them more reliable and efficient energy sources as we transition. And I think another key role that AI can play is on the efficiency side. So the efficiency side of the equation is not always talked about, but if we can we can use machine learning in order to model peak uses, etc., then we can actually work towards more efficiencies in energy. In the energy sector overall. So I think that's a critical part of the work of the university, and they were able to show some of the cutting edge work that they're doing to the delegation.
That's fantastic. Hannah, the joint statement that was issued after the visit, Dr. Sultan was quoted as saying, "The UAE believes there is a sound business case for progressive climate action which can deliver more economic growth with fewer emissions." He then went on to say, "As the world will still rely on hydrocarbon fuels for decades, it's essential to ensure that they are produced responsibly and are as low carbon as possible. The UAE is one of the leading carbon intensive producers in the world and is investing in technology to build on this distinct competitive advantage." In the joint statement, the two countries agreed to focus on joint efforts on renewable energy, hydrogen, industrial decarbonization, carbon capture and storage, nature-based solutions, and low carbon usage, low carbon urban design. Can you speak a little bit about this? And if I may to begin, can you speak on the transformative potential of hydrogen and the seriousness with which the UAE is pursuing technologies in this area as well?
Absolutely. So I think it's worth reiterating, first off, Danny, that really the oil and gas sector is critically important to the world economy. So we're making the sector part of the climate solution by emphasizing that focus on hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and renewable energy generation. We believe that we can make more of an impact if we harness the contributions of this important sector in our climate action work. So if I speak of perhaps different parts of the UAE and how that factors into the equation, we have recently made a major investment in high-tech indoor farming as part of our commitment to reducing water consumption and food loss. Our environmental agency is the Middle East's largest and most advanced environmental regulator, and they've established 46 air quality monitoring stations and 49 nature reserves. We've also deployed billions of dollars in renewables across 70 countries, having invested 400 million in concessional finance globally, including 100 million to bring renewables to the 27 island nations I mentioned earlier. And we do have the results to prove that commitment. We've also, I think, worth mentioning ADNOC's work. So ADNOC has established the first carbon capture and storage facility in the region. Their Riyadh facility has the capacity to capture 800 tons of CO2 per year and will be expanded 6 times by 2030. They've also pledged to reduce emissions significantly over the next decade and are a vital partner in the mitigation work that we have as a country. Also, in terms of the hydrogen exploration, this is something that the ADNOC is working with together with Masdar and partners in the country to look at hydrogen as a zero carbon fuel, currently in its infancy, but that could be a game changer as a clean fuel in the next 20 years. Of course, the UAE is well positioned to leverage existing gas infrastructure and commercial scale carbon capture capabilities to develop blue hydrogen. And we're also exploring green hydrogen through the Abu Dhabi Hydrogen Alliance that brings together key energy and industrial players in the UAE. I think that's in a nutshell. The different areas that we're looking at in terms of investments moving forward.
Thank you, Hana. And we had representatives and leaders of the Hydrogen Alliance on webinar 2 weeks ago, and they made it very, very clear, while this is nascent in the world, that the UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular are going to play a key role in developing this for the future and are going to be in on the ground floor, if you will, of those developments. So that's very, very exciting and a very, very good opportunity for our member companies and businesses to get involved with for the future, for sure. Hana, say a few words about Masdar for our audience. I visited Masdar many times, the first renewable city in the world, and all the technologies that are being developed and showcased there. Talk a little bit about the importance of that from the UAE's perspective of being a leader in the world and what it represents, please.
With pleasure, absolutely with pleasure. So, as mentioned, Masdar was, of course, part of the origins, really, of our climate action commitments, and we've gone, with the work that they've done over 15 years, in order to build a track record, really globally in this space. So our renewable energy portfolio's expansion of 400% just in the last decade has really been driven by the work of Masdar. With Shams 1 is, of course, one of the world's largest concentrated power plants, and that's, of course, was mentioned earlier, and has contributed significantly to our own our clean energy transition, paving the way forward for the development of Noor Abu Dhabi, which I believe is currently the world's largest single source solar plant. So Masdar was originally, though, created as an investment vehicle. And now they actually have solar and wind projects in locations across the world, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Uzbekistan, and even Oman. And I think it's worth maybe even mentioning a couple of these investments. In 2020, Masdar acquired a 50% interest in 3 utility-scale wind farms in Nebraska and Texas, and then 5 photovoltaic solar projects in California. The total about 689 megawatts of solar and 75 megawatts of lithium-ion battery energy storage. Masdar's first entry into the U.S. Was in 2019 with investments in 2 wind farms in Texas and New Mexico. And from, beyond these investments, of course, the whole of Masdar goes beyond just the investment space to really being almost a testing facility or a testing bed for new ideas, really, in sustainable living. And so I understand that they go beyond just the headlines that you see to testing new things such as, for example, a sustainable Emirati home, what that would look like, and really looking at the cutting edge combined with our own traditions in order to build really a good life for people in the future too. I think that, of course, I think it would be fantastic for them also to be well represented on the council and in future sessions, perhaps.
They're our member, Hana, and we work very closely with Masdar. I think the world of the leadership there. So just to reassure you that we have a good relationship with them. I want to tell you, one of our audience members has written. Gary Rolshaw from L3 Technologies writes that he got his Abu Dhabi electricity bill this month, or energy bill this month, and it says, "Where's your energy coming from?" ? And the answer is, our generation plan for April is 3.1% solar, 81.4% gas, and 15.5% nuclear. And he says, "Well done!" ! So Abu Dhabi is very well along the way in diversifying its energy production resources. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Will the Office of U.A.E. Special Envoy for Climate Change be the focal point for U.A.E. efforts against climate change moving forward? And a corollary to that question, some people in the chat function are asking, who do they contact? And from a business standpoint, how do they connect? And who do they talk to? Maybe you could sort of answer that in that bundle of questions about the role of your office and where does business go to connect?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Danny, and thanks very much for that comment. And we look forward to the continued transition of that utility bill moving forward. I'd be very happy to give a bit of an overview of the Envoy's office. Our task as His Excellency's team really is to provide an ambitious set of options and partnerships for action, both at the macro political level and at sectoral level, addressing climate change while strengthening our economy. And there's really 4 areas where we're looking at partnerships. The first is greater renewable energy investment. So building on the fact that we currently have the world's cheapest solar, and all our partnerships with over 40 developing countries. Second is on further decarbonizing our oil and gas sector, bearing in mind that there will still be a demand for decades to come, and that needs to be as low carbon as possible in order to reach our climate ambition goals. So we already are very blessed to have the lowest cost and lowest carbon oil in the world, but are investing in carbon capture and solar to make it even more competitive. And then looking, as we mentioned before, at hydrogen as a new low carbon revenue source. The third area is research and development, especially for ultra low carbon food and water production. And we're increasingly looking at agriculture technologies, as this is a sector that covers about 1/5 of global global emissions, and that we believe would benefit a lot from further research and development. And then fourth being advocacy, which is making the visible business case for climate action from the heart of the hydrocarbon industry. So we're very keen to welcome the world to the UAE and to offer strong platforms for dialogue in the coming years. And for that, we are planning and inshallah will be on the United Nations Security Council formally from the beginning of next year, and plan to promote climate security during our time on the council. So those are the four areas. In terms of how it's split, we are the focal point for international partners. As many of you know, this is a complex challenge, and it needs to be handled both top down and bottom up. His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al Jaber has been a pioneer in this field for years, including in the last time that he was the Special Envoy for Climate Change between 2010 and 2015. And so his appointment as Climate Envoy again last year just highlights the UAE's commitment to this subject matter. And he is the lead on UAE climate diplomacy. And of course, many of you know His Excellency Dr. Abdullah Al Naimi, who is the Minister of Climate Change and Environment, and who works closely with His Excellency Dr. Sultan, and has his own leadership track record leading the UAE's approach to innovative climate change solutions. So the two teams work closely together, and with the envoy having more of an international focus, and the Minister of Climate Change being the main focal point for our partners in country, but of course with all of us working across the UAE, as well as with partners around the world. Just to recap, that this isn't something that an office or a ministry can solve, or even a country, but it really does require that global effort.
Just to put a fine point on the question, Hana, thank you very much. How can business connect? Is your office playing any role in connecting business to the right points of contact elsewhere in the UAE, or not?
As much as we can, we're very, very happy to help in conjunction with, of course, our embassies abroad, and with the Ministry of Climate Change. We do have a few different vehicles in which we connect with our colleagues across the country, and so we are happy, of course, to meet new businesses interested in the UAE as well.
I got it. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Expo, the greatest show on earth, which is coming up in September. But Hana, if I didn't at least ask you to say a word or two about the excitement that you feel about what's going to happen in the Leaders Summit in the next few days, I would be not a good host of webinars. So just from whatever you can tell us about what's going to come in the next few days from your perspective, what's important to the UAE with President Biden's historic Leaders Summit on climate.
Well, thanks so very much for mentioning the summit. That is, of course, the focus of our week. And we're very privileged that the UAE was chosen among just two countries in the region, together with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to participate among 40 countries in this summit. We do believe that it is a continuation of what we were talking about at the beginning of our session of both countries, both the UAE and the US's commitment to the subject. We understand that there'll be a big emphasis on countries coming forward with ambitious ideas, with ways of working across sectors, in order to really come up with solutions for this increasing crisis. But to see and identify opportunities, and that's really where we're coming to from the UAE, to unlock those economic opportunities for the future. And so we're looking forward to high-level participation and to engaging with the countries there, as well as the countries beyond the summit on the road to Glasgow.
Well, we look forward to what's going to come from the summit, and we look forward to the opportunity to follow up with you at some point when it's convenient to you after the summit, to sort of get a readout, if you will, from how it all went and whatever the new announcements are that come out of the summit as a result. Let's talk about Expo. The Business Council's been involved with Expo 2020 since the very, very beginning, almost 10 years ago, of when Dubai and the UAE thought that they might like to host the world's greatest show. It's been a wonderful journey, an amazing journey, strong, strong leadership, as you know well, from Reem AlHashimi, Her Excellency Reem AlHashimi and her team. And it had to be delayed because of COVID, but it's going to start on October 1 in Dubai, and we are all gearing up to be there, to be on the ground, to be part of the amazing festivities that are going to occur, the theme weeks that are going to focus on different thought leadership areas. Can you tell us a little bit about Sustainability Week at Expo 2020 and what you're expecting, hoping to see come about at Sustainability Week?
Thanks very much, Danny, and we certainly share the excitement. We're absolutely thrilled. This is something that we've been planning for a decade now, if I remember correctly, almost. So we're very excited to see how the world has come together around this theme of connecting minds and creating the future, which we very much believe actually is in line with also our philosophy around climate diplomacy and climate action. And so we're very excited, and we hope to welcome everyone on this call to Expo in person in Dubai from the 1st of October 2021 is when we hope the doors will be open, inshallah. And as Her Excellency Reem AlHashimi, the Director General of Expo and Minister of State for International Cooperation, always says hayakum, which means welcome. Welcome, absolutely. And I think it's not by mistake, Danny, that the Expo opens on the 1st, and Sustainability Week is, I think, the first thematic week that we will see as they open their doors. And I think that's just testament to both the priority on the international stage and the opportunity that there is within Expo to foster, I think, partnerships on this topic, to see what work can be done through the 6 months there and beyond. But also to point out that another thing that I think our leadership often say is that what they're doing at the Expo site is creating the city of the future, and it just so happens that it'll host a world exposition for 6 months. So I think that Sustainability Week will be a good bridge towards really thinking of, within all the pavilions and across the site, how we can showcase both what countries are doing on sustainability and climate action, but also have the dialogues and the conversations that can link really the work of all countries and see where partnerships may arise as well, and then move beyond Expo towards that curation and creation of a sustainable city of the future as well, and in other aspects too. I think that the near universality of Expo is something that I personally am very, very excited about. It's hard to find a place with 192 countries in one, and it's harder sometimes to come to agreement with that much diversity. But I think the significance of that in creating really almost a parliament of humanity and bringing the world together under this theme of opportunity is one that I think is highly significant and will hopefully yield great results. And so we very much look forward to it.
Well, we are all so excited about the World Meeting at Expo 2020 in Dubai starting in October. We will be there. The U.S. Pavilion. Thank you for the close cooperation from the U.A.E. in helping the U.S. make the U.S. Pavilion possible. Our government is very, very excited to take part in Expo, and our member companies are very, very keen to participate and to be part of this great and wonderful celebration that's going to occur. Hana, we're coming near the close here. I'll give you the chance to sort of encapsulate or sum up anything that you might like to say. But I always ask a question of, especially some of my most optimistic speakers that I interview, like you. What what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about in doing your job for the future and being successful? And it's critical to all of us in our jobs that we move the ball down the playing field, that we make progress in what we do. What keeps you up? What do you worry about? What do you think about? And what do you see as areas where you know something might come out of the blue that will surprise us and we should be prepared for? I know that's a
Um,
open-ended question. Take it any way you want.
Thank you so very much, Danny. Thank you. I think that's really the question of the century, and climate often does come up. I think for many people as the number one concern, particularly people with children. It really is becoming, for many countries, an existential matter. For particularly small island developing states, a simple 2 to 4 centimeter sea level rise means that they no longer have sovereign land. There's estimates that if current trends continue, that you might have in order of 250 million climate refugees worldwide. In the next 20 to 30 years. And that's a very real concern. And it basically explains why you see campaigns being run on the idea that climate policy is a part of every policy. I think these are things that keep many people up at night. For me, what keeps me up at night, quite literally, is perhaps our team and my boss, who work around the clock to really be able to deliver. But really, because there is a real sense, and I have said this, but I think that it can't be stressed enough, a real sense of opportunity, but that it is a time-bound sense. That there is a lot of work to do, not just within the country, but across the world, in order to tease out really how we can turn this existential crisis into an opportunity, and how we can sort of create an economic model that can be scaled and replicated, and that can preserve future, our planet, but also prosperity, and dare I say happiness for future generations as well. So I think that's kind of where we're coming from, and I think that drive and that vision and that sense, we understand that the science does provide us with this window, with this window of opportunity. I think that's what's behind really both the success of this trip, what I think will be behind the success of this week's summit, what I hope will be the success moving down the road to Glasgow and beyond, as of course the UN Climate Conference takes place in different regions, and so we'll have that conversation in Africa, in our region of Asia, and beyond. And really, what keeps us united and what keeps us all optimistic moving forward.
Well, Hannah, I have to tell you, when I started in government in the mid 1980s, what kept us up at night, obviously, at my time, was the U.S.-Soviet rivalry and the threat of nuclear war. And I have to tell you, this existential threat is just as great as that existential threat in those days, in the final outcome, if the worst effects were to come to pass. So thank you for all that you and your team and your leadership are doing to play such an innovative, forward-leaning, progressive role in setting an example for others to follow. It's so very, very important. We look forward to continuing to partner with you, with His Excellency Sultan Al Jaber and the rest of your teams to support your important work. We have many companies on the line that want to help and be involved if they can, and we'll come back appropriately with the right contact details as necessary to point them in the right direction. Thank you and to all the audience for attending today. Please stay tuned for what's going to happen this week. I've been told that there's going to be some very big announcements coming out of the summit, and the UAE will be part of some of those announcements for sure. So we can't wait to hear some of the detail of what's going to come. It's going to be a really amazing week, and thanks for all your tireless work in leading up to that. I'll just make one more note about our programming for the week ahead. We are going to host tomorrow, on a webinar tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon in the UAE, the new Israeli ambassador or head of mission to the UAE, Etan Nahya, Israel's first ambassador at the Embassy of Israel to the UAE, to Abu Dhabi. And this webinar will take place Tuesday, tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. in the UAE. And if you would like to join, anyone in the audience would like to join, please let us know and we'll get you links for that. Hana, again, thank you. Good luck this week. Try to get some sleep, and especially during this holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan Kareem to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Ramadan Kareem to everyone. Thank you.
All the
And
best.
thanks for having me. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.